In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
Vienna, 1683. Today is September 11th, 1683. The mighty army of the Ottoman Empire, led by the savage and radical terror troops of the Dar al-Harb, surround the walled city of Vienna and begin a siege to break the golden apple of Europe and kill, enslave, or convert all of its inhabitants. The valiant citizens stand against the tyrannical army with the steadfast leadership of Count Ernst Rudiger von Stromberg, the help of the ever-living rebel Cyrus the Dead Guy, and the hopes of the faraway King Jan Sobieski III and his army of flying hussars. The Vienna 1683 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us. The Non-Standard Squad, 1944. World War II. 3 weird American soldiers are on a search and rescue mission into the oldest and darkest regions of Europe. A cursed, ever-living warrior, Cyrus the Dead Guy. An experimental warbot, Sergeant Lane McCord. An all-red axe, mysterious rogue with a demon-possessed arm, come face to face with an army of magically corrupted, machine-obsessed elves, a magic hammer-wielding Norse Ubermensch, and a Nazi wizard who is a member of the ancient Dark Order of the Shining Hexagon. The Non-Standard Squad 1944 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us.
It seemed easy to destroy the settlement, for it had no walls. That is a matter the Roman commanders neglected. Tacitus, describing the destruction of Camilla Dunham. Boudica, Boudica! I am the boogeyman. Yeah.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right, welcome to the Abercast. Right off the top, there's a trigger warning for this episode. If you're a Roman, you might not like it. I just want to remind everybody that my first prose story has been published in a book called David J. Fairhead Presents Fiends of the Flesh. I can't pronounce the name of my story. I think it's something like The Communion of Scarvigar Jello. Anyhow, I also got commissioned to do the cover of this book, so it's doubly special for me. There'll be a link in the show notes if you guys want to check it out, and please do. Also, fresh in the on-demand world, Novus is a prog rock band. They are just releasing their first of a series of EPs out. And I got commissioned to do the cover to that too, and that shit is heavy metal. It's got hammers and lightning and like winged helmets, kind of a robot looking dude. The name of the EP is Hammer. You go check it out. Check it out. I'll have a link. I believe it's a link to Bandcamp there. You can check out whatever they have, whatever they're offering over there. But the cover is mine. I got the scanning done on my next couple projects. I'm working on the typesetting for one of them, and I'm still working on art and writing for at least 2 more. So just a little heads up. I want you guys to know, or I want to get to know you guys. So please drop me a line. It's a great way to support the show, besides buying some comic books, is sharing the show with your friends. If you are the kind of person that listens to this and you like the weird stuff that we talk about, alt history, religion, mythological stuff, you probably know someone else who might like it too. So go ahead, feel free to share the show, please. Also, you can write I'm starting to want some reviews, some iTunes reviews. So if you guys are able to do that, I know iTunes is a pain in the dick sometimes, but it will really help the show out, and it'll let me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. And you also feel free to drop me a line on Twitter. All that stuff you can find on the website, stigmatastudios.com. So I'm just not a wild man talking to myself in this dark studio. I kind of want to know who I'm talking to. This episode, I don't know if it's because I've been watching too much Daenerys Stormborn on Game of Thrones, or if it's this Wonder Woman movie or what. Or if it's just watching places like England and France just inching closer to globalist agendas, the new empire, the new global empire, instead of farther away, which is what they need to do. We need a good kick in the ass from every time to time. And who better to kick us in the ass than a warrior, a woman, a rebel? Tonight, mix up your Jin Jihad. Take your shirt off. Mix it up with your spear. Run it over with your battle chariot, because we're going to talk about blank. We're going to talk about Boudica and the Boudica Revolt. So, yeah, get ready. I'm going to take... God damn it. Take a quick second here and get my shit together so I can fucking go on like a professional. All right, we start our story off. This is the age of the Roman Empire. Rome has started expanding very shortly after the founding of the Republic in the 6th century. That's BC. By the 3rd century BC, it was expanding outside of the Italian peninsula already, and soon no land or sea would stop it from its dreaded expansion. Eventually 30,000 trained, equipped, and disciplined Roman soldiers were on the British Isles, expanding these Celtic British to death. These dudes were in a tough spot. They were far away from home. They were carrying the reputation of Rome on their backs and in their hands, and they were an ocean away from any kind of backup. In England or Britain in Britain back then, these Celts weren't terribly organized. They had like large families, and then these families would marry into more large families, creating clans, and then they networked with each other, and these clans, they would develop a need for a leader who would arise, became the king. So you're going to hear me say stuff like the king. I don't know what these people were actually, and queen. I don't know what these people were actually called. But the folks that we're talking about, the Icians, they're in modern day Suffolk, England. That's kind of where they are. They're on the eastern side of the island, and there's like a little protrusion there if you look at it, and like that's kind of like where we are, where we're gonna start our story. Actually, we're starting our story in Rome, so whatever. Okay, so in like 40 or 41 BC, the Roman Empire. Nope, 41 AD, the Roman Empire gets a foothold, and a lot of the kings and leaders of these villages make treaties with Rome. So they basically become citizens. They paid taxes, but they got the good stuff too. Like they got roads and fucking sewers and running water. And basically, kind of like the unspoken thing about this is that this is actually how the world became civilized, is by this expansion of the Roman Empire. And I mean, that's evidence because back in 450, when Rome calls all the legionnaires back because they're being attacked, it basically signals the fall of the Roman Empire. Europe falls into the Dark Ages because the people that knew how to keep the shit running is gone. So, and I'm not gonna. Yeah, okay, that's enough right now. The Roman Empire puts one of the things they do is they put this contemporary colony in England, and this thing is called Camilla Durin, and it's a colony. It's a settlement. It's the Roman capital of Britain at this time. The problem is that the colony has garrisons, and the more Roman people that are there that aren't like farming or like finding food, they start soaking up these resources, which puts pressure on these surrounding tribes, and it's kind of how it sets the stage for all this stuff coming up. It's not what gets the party started, but it kind of sets the stage. It's bringing in the Doritos and the beer bowl. It's getting everything ready for this party to get kicked off. It's sowing seeds of discontent. It's going on in these Celtic Brits' minds. That they're being occupied, and they're paying all these crazy taxes, and they're getting pushed off their land. They're having to give up more and more of their foodstuffs. And across the sea, at this time, Nero was the emperor. Nero obviously famously fiddled when Rome burned during the great barn fire of Rome. I don't think fiddles were invented back then. I think it's probably some kind of allegory for just a guy who was having a party, I guess, when Rome was burning. But he also, in legend and lore, was the guy who martyred Peter and Paul. He martyred Peter to martyr Paul. But Nero was the emperor at the time, and he really, really, really wanted this British subjugation. And he would actually be cursed with a string of rebellions and uprisings. He's famously known for being the worst emperor. Like, when scholars and stuff kind of get these lists together, they actually put Nero as worse than Caligula. So, I mean, I don't know. If you watched the Bob Guccione Caligula movie, if you knew what you were doing, it doesn't seem too bad. But this guy was worse than that. The string of rebellions and uprisings he had to deal with was Parthia, where he was fighting a newly crowned king of Armenia. In 60, he had to deal with Boudica's uprising, which we're going to be talking about tonight. That's the main topic for this evening. In 65, he had to do with the Pisolians conspiracy, which one of his own dudes tried to fuck him up. And then in 66, there was the first Jewish and Roman War, which we might get into sometime because it's pretty interesting how the timelines are a little weird on that. But So that leads me to this thing that I should have read before. About this episode kind of in weird ways connects with a couple other episodes we did. It kind of links up with the St. Patrick's episode. I believe it was called St. Patrick as Ophiuchus, episode 21. And it also kind of links into the Vlad the Impaler, Vlad the Lord Impaler, in the night battle of Turgovista in episode 33. It kind of links in with that because we kind of talk about the fall of the Roman Empire there. Okay, so Nero, because he's kind of obsessed with this British subjugation, so they originally got their foothold back in 40. It's now 60 AD, and he's kind of getting bitchy about these Britons, and he kind of is just like, it's this tiny island, just fucking take it. That's my Nero impersonation. So Nero appointed this apparently he's a super competent general. He had a pretty good reputation, but he was seeking a lot of glory, and his name was General Suetonius. And he appointed him as the governor. I'm going to say that a lot, and it's probably going to become varying pronunciation, but it's Suetonius Paulius. He appointed him as governor, and he sent him to Britain. And once this guy set foot on the island of Britain, nothing will ever be the same. Not for the Britons, not for the British, and not for the Romans. This kind of changes. This guy's arrival here kind of changes a lot of stuff. A lot of blood is about to be shed in Britain. All right, 60 AD, East Britain. A tribe of British Celts called the Iceni. For years, they've been what was called a client state of the Roman Empire. They had a treaty with Rome that gives them a lot of autonomy and a lot of liberty. They were allowed to rule themselves. The treaty stated that they were never to be ruled by a foreigner or led by a foreigner. And they got to mint their own money and this kind of stuff. They were ruled by this king who is Prosudicus. Prosudicus was married to Boudica, and they had two lovely daughters. So King Prosudicus passes away. In his will, he leaves the tribe leadership to the Roman emperor and his two daughters. It was like a split kind of thing. There's a lot of like political reasons that he did this. He thought that this would garner favor and like maybe give the emperor a sense of ownership to him and his people. So maybe they would get taken care of a little bit better. However, this condition, or it could have been a condition of the treaty that he had with Rome, as in like there's a part of the agreement where you can rule, and then when you die, it reverts back to it. I'm not sure how it goes or how it went. I just am like maybe that was one of the things. Even though in his will he put that it was going to go to the Roman emperor and his two daughters split, this actually was not followed at all, and Boudica actually took charge of the whole tribe. Well, along with roads and sewers and crucifying people, the Romans were also pretty good at collecting taxes. And they had this tax collector in London. There was actually a different name. It sounds a lot like London. It's like London or something like that. I'm just going to call it London. We all know what that is. So he was this tax collector in London. He was like the chief tax collector of Britain. And he gets a gander at Prosudicus's will, and he sees some dollar signs. He's like cha-ching all over the place. And this guy gets this idea. He's going to take the Iceni's from family-friendly client state to subjugated, conquered taxpayers. So this dude sent soldiers to plunder the lands of the Iceni's. they wound up stringing up Boudica. They wound up stringing up the Queen Boudica, and they publicly flogged her. And then they went on to these Roman soldiers. I'm saying it's not just this one fucking pussy tax collector out here doing this. Like, he sent some soldiers. So they strung up Queen Boudica and they flogged her. And then they raped her 2 daughters. So this is like the leader of these people being blatantly abused, for a show of power. They left the woman and these girls in the dirt, bleeding, totally subjected and beaten, they thought. So there was this attempt by the Roman Empire to humble the Icenian people and their queen. And they robbed and looted their homes, and they strung their queen up and flogged her, and then they raped the princesses of the land. But in the attempt to humble them, they failed. This did not work. Boudica actually reaches out to a neighboring village called the Tree Avantes people. And they decided they had a common enemy, and all they wanted to do was get out from under the heel of the Romans. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's this settlement colony, the Roman capital of Britain, and it's called Camillodunum. And that's where their first attack is going to. That's where the first attack is going to take place. These guys, they're smart. Like, they have tactic. We're going to get into this later. We're going to actually get into a little bit of weeds here about how tactically smart they are. But they definitely understand some stuff. And they're going to do exactly what Sun Tzu would tell them to do. They're going to exploit their enemy's arrogance and their hubris, and they're going to use psychological warfare, a lot of psychological warfare against the Romans. See, in Camillodunum, there was a giant temple erected to the dead Emperor Claudius, and it was a monument to the Roman expansionism, and it was a symbol of their domination. So it's important to know where everyone's at this time, all the major players. So I'm gonna run down where everybody is before I get going on this. So Governor General Suetonius is about 350 miles away in the island of Manoa, and he's slaughtering druids. He's out there, and the Roman Empire has identified druids as sort of like the backbone to the larger general British rebellion. So, like, from 40 to 60, they're like killing these druids wherever they can find them, because these druids are like they're like the pagan priests. They're like the judge. They're the ones that are keeping their old ways alive. So Suetonius is like, I'm just going to kill every fucking druid I can find. So he actually, in a kind of a famous military action, he goes to this island of Manoa and he charges these druids and he fucking destroys them. There's a story from one of these Roman historians about how they're driving them into their own fires, and then after they slaughter them all, it's not all that they're gonna do. He sets fire to their like sacred trees. They have these sacred tree groves, like where they go do their like spiritual, like their rituals and stuff. And Suetonius sends his army in and is like, burn it all down, burn all these fucking trees down. Let's get rid of this shit altogether. So it's, from a military point of view, it might be a good thing to do, but this severely fucks Suetonius in the ass because he's 350 miles away from this capital. And when he went, he took basically all of the capital's military with him. We're gonna get to that in a minute. So about 100 miles away from Camilla Dunham is Longthorpe. And Longthorpe is the home of the 9th Legion. That's remember that. Remember the 9th Legion lives in Longthorpe, and it's 100 miles away. And then there's like 50 to 70 miles away is where London is. And London is the home of this taxpayer, and he has a small fighting force with him. So here, I'm going to read you something right here from, this is Roman historian Cassius Dio, and he's going to tell us about Boudica's army. He says, this woman assembled her army to some 120,000, and she led her army against the Romans. So you can see like there's a numbers game about to be brewing. So she figures out that Suetonius is 350 miles away, and she starts mobilizing her forces, and they're going to march on Camilla Dunham. So they get there. It's, in this day and age, it takes about a few days to march 50 miles. So I mean, you have to understand that, because when we get into like all this, communication becomes a large part of this story in a little bit. So I want you to keep that in mind. Like going like 50 miles, like you can just jump in your car and go there in like under an hour. But back then, it takes a long time for word to travel, and it takes a long time for people to travel. So let's talk about this real quick. She rallies her army. The one thing going for her, and we'll bust into like the tail of the tape kind of thing later, but this is what I need you to remember for right now, is that these guys, they built war chariots. So Romans didn't use war chariots. Romans weren't flexible or maneuverable. They marched. They had an infantry and a cavalry, and they used like chariots for sports. We've all seen Ben-Hur and everything. So it's like, you know that they're like racing them and they're like battling them and jousting them or whatever. Well, these Celts were like, we're going to use them for fucking war. So there was like a guy driving the horse and a guy like in the back of the chariot with like spears. I don't think they had bows and arrows. They had like spears and shit. So they were able to close distance fairly fast when they were on the march. Okay, so that makes them a little bit more flexible and agile and quick on the battlefield. So, but that none of that's going to matter right now. I just need you to understand that they could do this. Okay, so she rallies her army, and she calls upon a Celtic war goddess and yells a prayer to the sky. And then Boudica rips her shirt off and leads the charge into the city. She's quite famous for fighting with her shirt off. And it's funny because a lot of her Celtic warriors fight naked. They smear this hallucinogenic blue paint on them. This is where like Braveheart got a lot of this shit. Like, Braveheart's actually a fallacy. Like, the story's kind of real, but like all the costuming and stuff is ridiculous. Like, the Scottish didn't start wearing kilts and their and all that stuff until like, I want to say like 300 years after William Wallace. Like, William Wallace was walking around with a fucking pair of pants. I'm sorry to ruin it for you, and I don't even know if they used the woot root or the woot blue paint. I don't know if they ever did that, but Boudica did. Her whole army did. It's like this slightly hallucinogenic paint that they would draw animal sigils and stuff on their skin. Like, I want to, fight like a, I don't know, deer or a stag or something. I want to take on the attributes of this. And it was like this, like a kind of backwoods pagan kind of war ritual. And you got to think that that's pretty cool. If I saw like this tall, red-headed warrior bitch painted blue running at me with a fucking sword, I'd probably piss myself too. Let me get back on track here. War chariots, she leads the charge in the city. Okay, so 100 miles away, the commander of the 9th Okay, so they saw these people coming, and they sent messengers out to 3 different spots. They sent a messenger out to London, they sent a messenger out to Longthorpe, and they sent a messenger out to the island of Mona, which is where Suetonius is. I just like saying his name, Suetonius. He's got the swagger, Suetonius. 100 miles away, the commander of the 9th Legion at Longthorpe gets word of a rebel army at Camilla Dunham. And he takes the whole 9th Legion, and he marches towards the embattled company. So when I say the whole 9th Legion, what I'm talking about is really 2,000 infantry dudes and 1,000 cavalry dudes. So if you remember to my reading, we're talking about Boudica has 120,000 screaming, crazy Celtic wild men tripping on this blue paint. In London, the tax collector that started this whole fucking mess in the first place. This is the guy that ordered Boudica to be strung up and flogged. And he was the one reportedly to tell the soldiers to rape these two girls. One was, I think one was 12. One was 10 or 12, and the other one was 15, I think. And he also gets word of the rebel army. So he sends 200 lightly armed men to help out. It'll take days for Suetonius, the Druid Slayer, to get word of this rebellion. Meanwhile, at Camilla Dunham, the whole settlement is being destroyed. Unarmed civilians are being slaughtered. Houses and shops are being looted and destroyed. They actually burnt this whole fucking city down. The people that survived the initial onslaught ran to this giant, I told you about this, the temple to Claudius, and they were hiding inside, and they wouldn't come out, and they locked the doors. So Boudica's like knocking on the door, and they're like, I'm not opening the door. And she's like, fine. So she locked the door from the outside and burned the whole fucking temple down. On top of these people, they say that the screaming went on for hours while these people were being roasted inside this temple. The British looked at the whole thing as like scorched earth. They razed the whole city, kind of like the Old Testament God would have done. Just burn the whole fucking thing to the ground. And this is a pattern that they're going to follow at least 2 more times. So when we come back, we're going to find out what Suetonius and what the tax collector and what the 9th Legion are going to do in response to all this fucking bad news they're getting. Okay, so the Queen of Icena, Boudica, has been tied up, flogged in public, and her children have been raped by the Romans, hoping that she would fall into submission. And actually, it was a polar opposite reaction where she rallied an army, painted them blue, and gave them swords. And they went and destroyed the capital of Rome in Britain. So when the tax collector's folks, remember he sent 200 lightly armed blokes up there. When they show up, they are totally outmatched and slaughtered. Once the 9th Legion approached, remember they took the whole legion, and they were marching south because they were north of Camilla Dunham. They were marching to respond to what's happening at Camilla Dunham. They have 2,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry people versus Boudica's, let me get this again, 120,000 warriors. So what Boudica did is she set up an ambush on the road. So in order to get from Longthorpe to where Camilla Dunham was, you have to go through like these woods, and there's roads. So he's marching the Ninth Legion, the 3,000 men of the Ninth Legion. He's marching them on a road in the woods in probably like a column, no more than probably 4 dudes across, I imagine, because these guys are like beefy, and they got these. We're gonna get into their equipment and stuff later, but they're not very easily mobile. That's not the key to the success of the Roman legionnaire. So it's probably column formation, stretched out a little bit because they're marching like they're on a road march. Now we know, for modern military, when you're doing drill on like a surface or a tarmac, you close ranks pretty tight. But when you're doing long road marches, you get strung out a little bit because no one's calling cadence, no one's keeping left, right, because you're just fucking walking down the road. So in order to do that and not step on everybody's feet all the time, you just naturally space out. It's a difference between like a forced march or a road march rather than drill instructing. So like I doubt like the whole time these people are moving around, the whole 6 days or whatever it is, there's someone calling cadence, keeping these guys in step. So that tells me that they are spread out, which makes them vulnerable because they're not in a position to maneuver. The key to these ancient warriors is the same thing with the Greeks, is their ability to get their shields close together. And this is also something important about, it's going to come up later, I think, about having uniformed equipment. And these shields, they're the exact same size for every guy who's carrying them, and it's easy just to like put them together, and it creates like a scale, not so much scales like the hoplites, like in 300, where they actually interlock the shields to create this phalanx. So the Romans had these rectangular shields that were kind of like sloped in at the edges, kind of like semicircles, but not so deep, But the key to their success is being able to like jam up the shield, and they actually create a wall. And there's going to be a great example of this, what they're going to do with the power to do this later. So because they're like stretched out, they're not in a position to maneuver well, they're just kind of walking down this road. They're actually really fucking themselves in the ass. Because somehow Boudica knows that they're coming. And she set up an ambush in the forest. So she sent a large number of her force to meet them head on the road. But on both sides of the road, further up, she's got thousands of dudes just hiding in the woods, out of sight. So when this force meets this, when the Roman force, the Ninth Legion, meets Boudica's force on the road, because of the forest, they can't do a flanking maneuver. But Boudica's already has her flank set. So as soon as they come up against them, these guys come out of these thousands of dudes come out of either side of the forest, and the Romans, like I said, they're screwed. Like this is a harassment maneuver. This is something that Sun Tzu would totally say. So they're going to come up, they're going to envelope the back of the column so these guys can't go, and then you just keep thrusting your spear until everyone's fucking dead. And that's what these guys did. Thousands of guys, thousands of men hidden and waiting. They spring this total trap. It envelops the column, and these guys just keep stabbing. This inability for them to turn and create this wall because they're too far away, I believe, is probably one of the crucial things. And we're going to see this defensive maneuver with these shields is strong, bro. You're going to see it. You hang in with me. We're going to talk about this maneuver that they have. They actually turn it into an offensive weapon. Not like they're like swinging their shield around, smacking people with it like Captain America. They actually make it into like a fucking pair of scissors. We'll get to it. Hold on. I'm getting excited. I'm getting too far out of my way. This is the same thing. Like in modern warfare, we would do an L-shaped ambush here, which is like if you imagine just in your mind, however I just described this, the forest and the road to you, just keep that. And what you would do is wherever the Romans were coming in, you would create a kill box in the road. It'd be like a triangle. You would have men lined up on one side of it, still in the woods, being concealed. And then on either side of the road down the way, a little bit, like wherever the other side of your L is, you would have one guy at the corner, and you'd have one guy on the other side of the road perpendicular to him. And this guy is like the key dude, the guy that's the farthest away on the bottom side of the L, because he's the one that is in the most danger. So you key everything off of him at this time. So you guys let this column get all the way in the kill box or as much as you can. This guy starts firing. Boom. You guys, like, you're creating like 2 diagonal lanes of fire, and then like however many fire teams or riflemen or whatever you have going the long way down the L, and you just wipe all these people out. Now there's variations of this. This is a great place to use claymore mines, this kind of thing, especially if you're like, if you have to do it on the fly. This is like the classic ambush. Like, that's it. I just taught you guys how to like win. Like that's the way to do it. Okay, that's the way to do it with guns, in case you don't have any spears or swords with you. All right, so the Governor General Suetonius finally gets word that there's this rebellion going on. And he starts moving his massive forces. He sends word for other forces to meet him in London. So like he sends word to he sends an order to Longthorpe, and he's like, "Hey, get the 9th Legion to London," because he doesn't know their toothpaste already, like their fucking dog food, like they've been ground up already. But he sends word to, I can't remember what the other place is, but they wind up never even responding to him. Like, they do not send their forces at all. They're like hiding. they're non-compliant because they're probably terrified of what's going on. But he's trying to get all of his forces to meet him in London. He knows no detail. This is his biggest problem, is he knows no details what's going on. He doesn't know who's leading this battle. He doesn't know if it's just some rebel rousers. He knows that the capital didn't have a wall. He knows it was pretty exposed. So it could have been like some real awesome soldiers. You know, that's probably what he was thinking. He probably wasn't thinking the whole west of Britain united against him. But he needs a firm power base, and he needs it solidified before he figures out what kind of action to take. So that's why he's trying to get everyone to meet him in London. And what he does is he's like, "Yo, bros, march to London as fast as you can, not too fast, you know, because I need you to have something left in the tank when you get there. But I'm gonna ride ahead so I can get some intel," which is crazy. Like you wouldn't do that. So unbeknownst to him, Boudica is also headed for London, because after burning down Camilla Dunham, after conquering and burning down and massacring every man, woman, and child in Camilla Dunham, London was our next target. So the word is starting to spread. And remember what I said, it takes a few days to go 50 miles in this day. And Suetonius learns about the 9th Legion, and he's starting to understand kind of what he's up against. The taxpayer scumbag who started this whole thing in the first place learns of Camilla Dunham, and his response is to get the fuck out of Dodge. He leaves the country. He runs to France to wait out this Holocaust that's about to happen. When Suetonius gets to London, he understands what's going on. He knows that the force that he brought with him is not able to defend London. So he takes every man, woman, and child that can move, and he takes them and he abandons London, and he rides back north to link up with his 10,000 troops. So Boudica rides on London. and she murders everybody that's there, takes everything that's worth taking, and burns the rest of it to the ground. This is like her MO. She's like, I'll take it all and burn it to the ground and kill everyone there. Okay, then she figures out that Suetonius is moving back north to hook up with the majority, his larger force. So she chases Suetonius north, and she stops at the third. She ramshackles and she stops at every Roman settlement that she finds, but she stopped at the third largest city, the third largest Roman city in Britain, and she does the same. She ramsacks it, kills everybody, burns it to the ground. That's the way that she rolls, son. She's also picking up warriors. As this legend and this story is growing, more people are coming out to support her. Also, probably to get some loot. They're probably getting, they're probably wanting to get some of that sweet booty. And they probably also want a little piece of these Romans. It looks to everyone involved, to everyone that's going, and the ease in which they're just crushing these towns. They are like, this is it, son. We just got to kill the rest of this army, and we're ready to go. And look, we're 120,000 and growing. We're 120,000 and growing, and they're like, they got 10,000 dudes. Like this, it's gonna be easy. It's gonna be fun. Let's start the barbecue. We'll be done by the time the steak's ready. So as she's picking up warriors, one of these Roman historians estimates that her ranks have swelled to 230,000 as she heads north to Suetonius, who is wildly outnumbered. So at this time, Suetonius does exactly what Sun Tzu would tell him to do. You need to choose your terrain. You need to choose your terrain to give you the biggest advantage and to give your opponents the largest disadvantage. We're going to see how he does. All right, so Suetonius found, we're last left off, Boudica and her gigantic army of screaming, tripping, 230,000 wild warriors are chasing Suetonius and his 10,000. Is it 10,000? Is that what we said? 10,000. His 10,000 man force north. And he's looking for a good place to use as a battlefield that he could use to his advantage and disadvantage his attackers. Because he thinks that he's in trouble. He's like, I'm wildly outnumbered. But because the message that he sent, the one message that he sent was to the 9th Legion that was already decimated. The other message that he sent was to London, which just got burned to the ground and smote upon his ruin. And the other message that he sent, no one sent any soldiers to him. He was expecting to double his soldiers, which probably would have heartened him a little bit. But they just showed up. They just didn't no comply. So he found this thing. He found this terrain feature that was high on both sides, and then there was a low field, and there were woods to his back. He's going to use this as a funnel. So as Boudica's marching, or they are not marching. They just kind of walk. They just flow. Like there's no order to these people, and this is actually going to become part of her coming problem. So they're just like a wave. Like there's no order to them. They're not soldiers. They're just warriors. If these guys just broke off and did one-on-one combat, the whole history of the world could possibly have changed. But because these 10,000 legionnaires were there with their equipment, and this is kind of like what just, I know I said 300 earlier, but like, just think of like Leonidas at the Hot Gates, except instead of like the narrow cliff rocks, they were just using these high terrain features to do the same thing. So they could control how many men were on the front line of Boudica's attack. And they have, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So he found this great killing place, basically. And Boudica's army lined up for the final battle. When her forces started charging, first of all, another thing that she did that she might have rethought is they charged across the whole field instead of like walking up, marching up. She was just like, all right, let's go cut the tongues out of these Roman bastards, and they fucking start charging. They're probably the first wave were probably winded as fuck by the time they got there, and they got their little battle chariots and all this stuff, which doesn't do any good when you're assaulting a wall. I could tell you that as a skateboarder. you're rolling at a wall, okay, whatever. It's shitty. This is not my A game, people. So they start charging, and it's a wild class of culture, as I've been kind of like talking about. Like, there's no discipline, there's no standard set of equipment, there's no tactics. Basically, their only tactic is to throw what you have at the enemy 100% of the time, which sounds like, it's like the heart. It's like the heart. This is like why the Battle of Endor is bullshit. Like, this exact thing right here is why the Battle of Endor is a load of shit. Because you have this army who has unified equipment, they have training, they have discipline, and a lot of people say, like, when you get into what these individual Roman soldiers say, they're terrified of these wild people, because they like run at you with just a sword, and they're naked and their dicks are flopping around, and they're like, they don't understand that. And on the other side, these wild horde people are just like, I don't give a fuck. Like, why are you wearing all this armor and your shield, bro? So here we go. We're going to do like a little tail of the tape kind of thing. First of all, you have a real trained, disciplined army versus a bunch of pissed off people. The army is going to win 100% of the time, I think. But, okay, so you have 10,000 soldiers on the Roman side. This is what they have. They have their sandals. They have nails in their sandals, so that it's like they have tread so they don't slip on the dead bodies they're about to plow through. They have leather and metal armor. They have helmets. So they have funny-looking helmets. They have 2 spears apiece. Heavy spears, because they're weighted at both ends. They have a gladius, which is this short sword that's used to gut you, which I'm going to explain that in a minute. And then they have the shield that I talked about. So now let's go over to Boudica's side, the Wild Horde side. They have hallucinogenic blue war paint. They have no or little armor. They have no, or some of them might have a shield. They have makeshift weapons, or swords, or axes, or whatever. But everyone's different. They have no tactics. They have no training, and they have no discipline. So, like I was saying, like, you compare these guys off. If I take, like Billy the Iceni versus, this fucking Bill the Roman, and put them in a fight together, I'm betting on the Iceni at that point. But these guys, the Romans, they don't have the numbers. They're wildly outnumbered. It's something like, I don't know. I can't do the math. But it's a huge calculation. It's a huge problem. And each of these dudes have spears. Each of these Roman soldiers have spears that they wait. So as soon as the wave comes in, they just loose these spears. So you think about 10,000 spears. Think about 2 volleys of 10,000 spears. Think about how much fucking penetration that is. And these spears had barbed edges, so it's like you can't get them out. If you do, you're just ripping your whole shit apart. If you happen to have a shield and this spear hits it, you either got to drop your shield, because it's like you can't drag this spear around with the shield. You can't take the time to like ply it out. So wave after wave of Boudica's rebel soldiers or rebel warriors smash into the Roman shields. Remember, their front lines are restricted by the train because of because of Suetonius's place to set the battle. He clearly has a superior military mind, tactics, and he has the discipline of his guys. When the first wave was riding up, he was like, yo, bros, listen, they got chicks fighting in there. Pfft, could you imagine that? They got chicks. Just stay cool. Remember our tactics, and you're going to be great. So he's like, just smashing them down. So these guys get behind they take cover behind their shields, and they use these small gladiuses to, like, they smash the shields, and they stick their gladiuses between the shields into like an upward cutting motion. They're not using them as like swords, like in these like Lord of the Hobbit movies or whatever. They're not doing like high guard slashing and going through and like doing the cling, cling, cling. They're hitting you with their shield, and while you're like trying to get your footing, they're gutting you. They stick this sword into your belly, up into your lungs and your heart. They do this kind of thing, and then they just let you bleed out in front of them. And then the next wave hits, and they just do the same fucking thing. So these guys had a rank of 10 deep in this thing. It's projected. It's, no one knows this, but it's like, say they had a like rank at 10 deep in the numbers that they had. They would only have to fight for like 6 or 7 or 10 minutes, and then the guy behind them steps up, and they retreat to the back and rest. This is a machine. This is a fucking Cuisinart. This is a kitchen utensil, and they just set it loose upon these Britons who are just running at them. I've been off script for so long. Hold on. Not script. I've been off notes. Don't give me any shit. All right, they're slashing bellies. So Suetonius is like, all right, everybody, like, now we've broken them, we think, so now we're going to get aggressive. So he orders them getting into a wedge formation, forward advance. So when I hear about a wedge formation, I think of small unit tactics. You get basically into a wing. The leader is kind of in the middle with his radio man. Then you have like good riflemen on the point. Like when you hear like the spy movies, like I Take Point or whatever, that's what they're talking about. When you're doing a patrol, the guy on the point of the wedge is on point. And then you have a 60 gunner or some kind of like crew serve weapon. Or area, they also call it an aerial weapon, to the rear, to the back, to cover, and that's how you move through terrain to do a patrol. But here, I was a little confused at first, because here, when they talk about the wedge formation, they literally mean that the whole front turns into a series of wedges with their shields. Think about like a shark's bottom jaw, just built from like an aerial view of Roman soldiers and their shields. So what you have is like this advancing force with the points of this wedge. They're moving forward. You have to move forward at an even pace to keep all your shields lined up. So they're moving forward, cutting through this huge mass. This horribly larger body of warriors, these just unskilled, unorganized sea of bodies. So the point of this jaw, as it's these teeth moving forward, are just cutting through, and then they're getting backed up into the back end of these teeth. Think about it as just like a zigzag, and just think about that moving through a bunch of people that can't stop it. And like you're gonna find out like the back part of this wedge of these jaws just become a awful kill zone. Think about it, has to move slow because as these people are getting killed, they have to walk over them, and that's why they have these nails in their sandals so they can just walk through you. You're not even dead. You just took a shot to the gut and you just fall down, and these Romans are just marching over you with nails in their sandals, just fucking just perforating you. So it's fucking gruesome. If you just draw, like wherever you're at, if you just draw like a zigzag and do an arrow in and do an arrow out at the point of a tooth and do an arrow in at the bottom of a tooth, and you just think about it. Just think about like the awful killing that got done in the southern half of that, in the lower half of this move. The wedge is like steel jaws pushing. The hordes getting caught in the corners or getting cut by points. They were driven backward. The horde was driven backwards, but they foolishly left their supply train behind them, so they got pinned in a box behind their wagon trains. And this fucking giant moving fucking walking Cuisinart that they're facing, and they just wind up getting mangled. This is a huge upset, as far as these guys are concerned. And it probably took hours just to walk and slaughter through these guys. And at the end of this huge ordeal, people say that Boudica went ahead and poisoned herself. No one knows what happened to her children. Suetonius murdered, hunted down, and enslaved any Icenians that he found. This dude's wrath was so great, there was not one single talk of a British rebellion for the rest of the time the Romans were occupying Britain. And then, as we all know, in 450 AD, Rome recalled the legions, and the Dark Ages were just around the corner for Britain and the rest of Europe. So I have a fun fact here before I wrap up. Harry Potter trivia. I'm not a Harry Potter fan. I've seen some of the movies. But there's a legend that Boudica's body is actually buried between platforms 9 and 10 in King's Cross Station in London. Some people, millennials maybe, there are people that will know that the thing to go to the magic school, the wizard school, is the train that goes to the wizard school is in platform 9 3/4. So I don't know if that is a Boudica reference or not, but they say that she's buried there. That legend actually, they say that actually started after World War II. I don't know. I believe that Alan Moore, no, he doesn't have it at that, but he does talk about Boudica in like one of the Extraordinary Gentlemen books. I can't remember what it is. All right, I don't know. You know what I'm saying, bros. All right, so
The Ages begins with the shocking story of Cain and Abel and the journey of violence and revenge spanning thousands of years, following Cain through his cursed life from an ancient invasion of malicious angels to the American Revolutionary War. A masterful, compelling journey through time, The Ages delves deep into arcane knowledge, myth, and legend. The art is stunning, and the story takes you on a journey where mortals, immortals, angels, and demons are all forced to deal with the folly that is God's creation. It's a beautifully dark and gritty ride through history. This 4-part story follows the astrological procession of the ages and how each 2,500-year age parallels major changes in the development of Earth's inhabitants. Cain's blasphemous struggle with the divine and sacred tyrant God will create and crumble empires, shape history, and cause a cosmic cataclysm.
So thank you guys. Oh, man, hold on. Thank you guys. If you want to support the show, I told you how to do that at the top. You can do the share the show with your friends on social media. You can go to Amazon or blah, blah, blah. You can go to Apple iTunes and rate the show. I'm looking for some reviews. I really want to know who you guys are and have, not a weird relationship, but have some kind of to know who you guys are and what's your favorite topics, because we jump around so much a little bit. You can rate and review the show there. You can pick up some books, share on the social media. Find me on the social media. You go to stigmatastudios.com. You can drop me a line. And also remember society-13.com. If you're wondering about what you should listen to next, that is a good place to start. You can find a lot of good shows there. So thank you guys. And you notice I did not plug the newsletter at all because I'm tired, everybody. I need to get some sleep. But thanks. Do 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 wow 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 do 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 do. I can't keep doing this. My computer just crashed. I don't have access to my closing music. Fuck. See you next week.